Nightmare ski trip. Lily's first big skiing trip. She and her friend rented a cabin in Snowmass, right next to the Aspen Mountain Ski Resort. It was her first time snowboarding, and although she had faced a few challenges on the slopes, she was eager to explore the area more with her friends. She got separated from Amy when she decided to take a break on the mountain, and a man approached her. He mentioned how he wasn't used to seeing many beautiful girls like her here. What she found strange was that her face was mostly hidden by her ski mask. Lily lied, telling him she was with her boyfriend to make him stop. But something unnerved her when he mentioned having seen her and her friend arrive. Lily didn't think much more about it, pretending she hadn't heard anything, and snowboarded away. It was also when she felt she was snowboarding better than ever. That morning, she returned to the mountain alone to practice. Halfway down, she saw a man from a distance. This time, she hid behind a nearby tree and observed. He was wearing the same jacket and ski boots as the man she met before. But then she noticed something unmistakable, a jagged scar over his eye, which Lily clearly remembered from the way he had looked at her so eerily. That's when she noticed his bag, slung over his shoulder, with a keychain bearing the letter J hanging from it. She felt everything growing strange and ominous, as if by instinct, so she called Amy to leave quickly. When she returned, ready to leave, a snowstorm began outside, trapping them and making it impossible to leave. She grew anxious and scared, locking all the doors. But when night fell, things started to get strange. Later that night, they went to their rooms to sleep. Lily, unable to sleep, stayed up looking at her phone. The house was quiet, but the eerie silence was broken by footsteps on the wooden floor. The sound grew louder, and then she heard something that sent chills down her spine. The doorknob turning. It wasn't her friend, it was someone else. She sat up and called out for Amy. No one answered, and panic started to set in. But she paused, wondering why they were trying to enter her room. She tiptoed to the door, pressed her ear against it, and listened carefully. The footsteps had stopped, and the silence was stifling. Lily quietly unlocked the door and turned the knob, pushing it open as gently as possible. When she cracked the door open, she saw a tall man moving around the house. His shadowy figure loomed in the dim light as he seemed to try to enter their rooms. At first, she couldn't make out his features, but then, under the faint moonlight from the window, she recognized him, the man with the scar over his eye, who had said strange things to her on the mountain. He was also carrying the bag with the J keychain. Terrified, Lily gently shut the door and locked it. She grabbed her phone and quietly called 911, whispering into the phone to avoid being detected. Then, the knocking began deliberate at first, then louder and more forceful. The man was trying to get into her room. She couldn't take it any longer. Lily shouted,
"Get out!"
She yelled, telling the man she had called 911. The banging stopped, and she heard his voice from the other side of the door.
"All right, girl."
His footsteps grew fainter as he walked away. Lily and her friend stayed locked in the room, terrified. Only when the police arrived a few minutes later could they confirm the intruder had left. The next day, Lily noticed something that made her heart race. A keychain had been left on the floor near the front door, possibly dropped by the intruder during his attempt to enter her room. Forensic experts collected it as evidence and found fingerprints on it. They analyzed the prints and matched them to a man with a criminal record known for breaking in, stalking, and harassment. Although the police had a lead, they had not yet located the intruder. The case remained open. Back home, Lily couldn't shake the thought that the man was still out there. She didn't know how he had found them, how long he had been following them, or what he might plan next. Nightmare in the dormitory. The room was pitch dark, with only a faint moonlight filtering through the curtains. Doll woke up in a cold sweat, his heart pounding as if it was trying to escape his chest. Doll gasped and sat up in bed. realizing that his roommate, Tyler, was standing over him, his face only a few centimeters away.
Dude, are you okay?
He asked, with a mix of worry and irritation. Dahl wiped the sweat from his forehead, embarrassed. It was only their first week in college, and he had already become the roommate with nightmares. As Dahl walked to class, he was still dazed from the night, the exhaustion dragging him down like lead weights. He panicked when he realized he was about to be late for class. It was only his second class, and he had hoped to sit near Lily, a sweet girl with beautiful, long hair who had caught his eye. Running to class, he deliberately chose a seat behind her and quickly found himself mesmerized. He was so distracted that he barely listened to the lecture. Just as he was thinking of how to start a conversation, his thoughts were interrupted when he was called on and reminded to pay attention. That night, he rushed back to his room, hoping his dreams would lead him to Lily, but the nightmare returned instead. He screamed again, and once more Tyler was annoyed.
You should really get control of yourself,
Tyler muttered. Dahl reassured him it was just another nightmare. The next night, Dahl sat on his bed, trying to focus on studying for an upcoming test. He worried that if he fell asleep, the nightmare would return and disturb his roommate again. But exhausted, he drifted off, and the nightmare came in one relentless wave. This time, Dahl felt paralyzed, a weight pressing down on his chest. Terror surged as he struggled to breathe, his vision obscured by wavy hair. He could feel that hair right in front of him. An overwhelming, intense feeling he had never known before emanated from a demonic presence. It appeared as if everything before him was real, desperate, screaming, unsure what to do. In his delirium, he summoned all his strength to claw at the demon's face. Instantly, he woke up, gasping for breath, and Tyler's face appeared hazily before him, shaking his head. Dahl glanced at his bed and saw his book still open. As he went to close it, he noticed an eerie coincidence. The book lay open on the page about Henry Fuseli's demon, the nightmare, and the image looked just like the creature he'd encountered in his dream. Determined to uncover the truth, Dahl grabbed his laptop and began researching. He stumbled upon a story about a demon that torments people in their sleep. He started connecting his experiences with this ancient legend, realizing it was eerily similar to his own. Suddenly, a knock on the door startled Dahl out of bed. He felt disoriented, unsure if he was still trapped in the nightmare. As he approached the door, it opened on its own. Lily stood there, her hair covering half her face. She stepped inside, moving slowly and unnaturally. A wave of fear washed over Dahl. That suffocating, disturbing feeling from his nightmares returned, tightening around his chest. Lily's expression was vacant, her behavior strange. Then, Dahl noticed a slow trickle of blood dripping from her face onto the floor. He asked if Lily was okay, but she didn't respond. She kept walking slowly toward him. She moved closer to Dahl, lifting her hair to reveal a bloody scratch on her face, the exact mark he'd clawed onto the demon in his nightmare. He backed away, mind reeling, body shaking, and shouted, "This can't be real." Dahl looked around the room, desperately searching for any sign of Tyler, hoping he would burst in and shake him awake, but he didn't appear. Dahl was alone. This wasn't a dream. Everything looked just like in his dreams. Darkness was closing in on his vision. Before he could react, she lunged at him, pinning him to the ground. Her weight crushed Dahl's chest, unbearable, and he heard a sickening crack as he felt one of his ribs breaking. Dahl tried to scream, but no sound came out. Her icy breath brushed his face as she leaned down, revealing rows of sharp, jagged teeth. The pain spread throughout his body, and his vision began to fade. His ribs snapped one by one under the crushing pressure, blood spilling from his mouth. The last thing he saw was her face contorting into a twisted, grotesque smile before everything faded to black. The ghostly tape. In a small dorm room, a typical living space for a college student, cluttered with textbooks and clothes. Each desk lamp serves as the only real source of light. Lai and Khan, two female students, are sitting on an old carpet next to the TV stand, preparing to watch a movie for their weekend break. The TV is old, seemingly from the 90s, still equipped with a VHS player. Beside the TV is an old cardboard box, filled with random tapes and outdated electronics. The box came from a trip they had taken earlier that day to a vintage thrift store. Back at the dorm, they rummaged through the tapes, laughing at the absurdity of their choices: old sitcoms, instructional videos, forgotten movies. Then, they found a plain black VHS tape. It had no markings except for a single word hastily scrawled in faded red ink on the label: "Don't." The label was torn and dirty, as though it had passed through countless hands before. They hesitated for a moment, but curiosity quickly won them over. Lai slid the tape into the VHS player. The TV crackled to life with a sharp, screeching sound. The picture was grainy, distorted, and flickered with a buzzing noise. The first image appeared, a dilapidated house in the middle of a dark, dense forest. The camera shook, as if it was being held in someone's hand. There was no sound except the rustling of leaves. The house is old and almost collapsed. As the camera moved closer, the creaking of the front door opening slowly filled the silence. Inside the house, the rooms were empty, covered in dust, old furniture draped with sheets. The air grew heavy, tense. In a long and narrow hallway, at the end was a door, slightly open. Then the screen flashed for a moment. What was happening was quite difficult to understand. The tension of the tape seemed to gradually seep into their space. A few seconds later, the camera was now in the basement, standing before a large circular symbol carved into the floor. Strange runes were etched into the surface. As they stared at it, they felt like they couldn't breathe. Then, a loud crash, and the screen jerked toward the far end of the basement. There, in the darkness, something moved. The two girls froze in place. It was tall, impossibly tall, with limbs that were too long and thin. Its face was hidden in the shadows, but its hollow eyes stared into the room. A faint whisper, barely audible, began to play through the TV speakers. But the sound quickly grew louder, more persistent, almost as if it was speaking directly to them. They seemed to be hypnotized. Lai couldn't take her eyes off the screen. Whispering like a mantra, Lai stood up and began to lose control of her body. Kan called her name, but it didn't seem to reach her ears. Lai walked towards the TV, eyes glassy, body stiff. She could feel Khan's eyes on her, but she couldn't stop. The figure on the screen seemed to pull Lai closer, its long, bony fingers stretched out as if wanting to catch her. Kan gasped, backing away. Kan suddenly realized that Lai was moving like a puppet on the TV. Lai continued to move like the figure on the screen, her body twisting unnaturally, her joints cracking. Kan could only scream in desperation. Lai continued to move as shown on the screen, her body contorted in a strange way, her joints cracking. Kan could only scream in vain. Lai's eyes began to roll back and a sick, twisted smile appeared on her face. Lai turned her head and approached Kan with her arms outstretched, her fingers slowly gripping her shoulders as if wanting to harm her. Khan, terrified, tried to reach out with trembling hands to stop the tape, but failed. The image on the screen mirrored every detail of what was happening in the room. Everything felt like something had stepped out of the TV. the long, spindly fingers stretched with gray, skeletal skin. The figure moved slowly toward them, its joints cracking with every step, as if just existing in this world was painful. And then the door burst open. It was Jay, our other roommate. The sudden interruption sent a shockwave through me, breaking the trance. Lai staggered backward, her arms falling to her sides. The figure retreated into the shadows with an ear-piercing screech that only Lai and Khan could hear. Then the figure was gone. We collapsed to the floor, gasping for breath, looking at each other in shock. The only thought in their minds was to get out and never look back. They scrambled to their feet, fleeing the room without a second glance, leaving the cursed tape behind in front of a confused Jay. The noise on the TV was distorted, and the final image showed that shadowy figure coming from the basement. It thought it was screaming like it was sealed again. Maybe it almost succeeded in escaping, and maybe Lai and Khan would be the replacements. Vengeance of the Soul. It was Saturday night, and Hannah was still at her university library, finishing a project due next week. Her friend had ditched her again, leaving her to finish it all on her own. She checked the clock and saw it was nearly 10 p.m., so she closed her textbooks and returned them to the shelf. Hannah went back to the table and put her books in her bag, and at that moment, she heard a noise. She looked around and thought she saw a man staring at her, but when she blinked, he was gone. Hannah left and headed home. She knew she shouldn't wander alone in a new city. Then she heard footsteps behind her and turned around, seeing a figure in a dark hoodie disappearing into an alleyway. She stopped, feeling a surge of fear. Was someone following her? She hurried on, relieved that her apartment was nearby. Hannah got into her building safely. She stepped into the elevator and pressed the button for the 14th floor. Just as the doors were closing, someone reached in to stop them. She held her breath as the doors opened, and a tall, fairly handsome man stepped into the elevator, his dark eyes looking at her with a warm expression. He started a friendly conversation, complimenting her outfit. She blushed, feeling a bit nervous. The elevator stopped on the 13th floor, and he stepped out, looking back at her and saying, "See you around." But as the doors started to close, Hannah saw him reach into his coat and pull out a shiny knife. Realizing the danger, she pulled out her phone as the elevator reached her floor. But just as she dialed the last digit for the police, the doors opened again. She screamed as she saw the man standing at the door, with nowhere left to run. He plunged the knife into her chest, her sweater soaking with blood. Pain spread across her chest as everything faded to black. The next morning, neighbors found Hannah dead in the elevator. Residents raised concerns about safety measures. Security cameras were installed, and more importantly, an emergency stop button was added to the elevator. Months passed, and the elevator killer remained uncaught. He prided himself on getting away with the perfect murder and wondered if he could pull it off again in the same building. He chose another Saturday night and saw a woman waiting to enter the elevator. He stood behind her, ensuring the guard was still distracted by his game on his phone. He pulled his hoodie tighter over his head as he noticed the camera. The doors opened, and the woman stepped inside. Just like before, she pressed 14, and he said he lived on the 13th floor as he pressed the button. But the woman didn't respond. She seemed strange, her head bowed, her hair covering most of her face. She wore a white dress and was barefoot, which he found odd, but her appearance didn't concern him. He kept a knife in his pocket, eager to use it. The 13th floor arrived, and he began to step out. He was ready to repeat what he'd done before, but as he turned back, he realized she was no longer in the elevator. Confusion crossed his face. He was certain she'd been there, but now the elevator was empty. He went in to check. The elevator door suddenly closed, and the overhead lights crunched and dimmed. He heard a hiss. The man felt the hairs on the back of his neck stand up as a chill ran down his spine. The guy looked up, and his eyes widened. The woman was crawling on the ceiling, her hair growing long and slithering like a snake. Her eyes were bloodshot, and her smiling mouth revealed many sharp teeth. He noticed a blood stain on her sweater and realized she was Hannah, the woman he had murdered. Hannah's spirit reached out, grabbing his neck, savoring his terror. Then Hannah pulled him into her bloody mouth, her razor-sharp teeth waiting for him. His screams echoed within the metallic confines of the elevator, but no one heard. The killer became nothing more than a memory, consumed by the very spirit he had created. Ghosts at the theater. Jane was a beautiful woman. She often filmed famous or mysterious locations with her crew, doing whatever it took to gain fame. Today, Jane was standing in the bathroom of the Birdcage Theater, also known as the Birdcage Theater in Arizona, which was now out of operation. Surrounded by whispers about the past, she looked in the mirror and applied lipstick with excitement welling up inside her. Hundreds of thousands of followers are waiting for her latest video, and she plans to take them on a dramatic journey about the haunted history of this famous theater. It is famous for its cruel history of violence and death. As she leaned closer to the mirror, something blurred at the edge of her vision. An indistinct shape hovered behind her. Startled, she screamed and quickly turned back to look. That surprise was from her boyfriend, Ken. He responded with an amused and teasing attitude. She started complaining about him scaring her. But after the laughter and teasing, she still felt something truly behind her, making her think about the curses that haunted this place. Ken set up the phone, urging her to start recording, and Jane was ready to begin. Through her journeys exploring haunted houses and places, she had built an online persona as someone who delved into the paranormal. Sharing such stories made her following grow continuously. Her sixth sense leads her to supernatural encounters. She begins to tell the dark, mysterious stories behind this Birdcage Theater. She started passing places like bars and old tables that made her feel a dark energy around her. Jane shivered and continued, recounting stories of gunfights and dreams. Broken ended life here. Suddenly, the piano in the corner played a faint, haunting melody. It was only a few notes, but they seemed to echo endlessly. Jane kept her camera steady, moving toward the staircase. As she climbed the stairs, she suddenly felt like she heard the mournful cry of someone, seemingly a woman. She carefully looked around. There was no one else, or any changes. She started to turn to ask Ken, but it seemed like no one heard that except me. Finally, she reached the theater's dressing room. The room was dark, with faded, peeling wallpaper at the corners. Jane felt a sharp, terrible pain in her heart as she stepped inside. She started sitting against the wall, trying to breathe. Ken worriedly told her to stop, but she was stubborn and determined to have footage at this place. Jane begins to recall the tragic gossip story of Margarita, a dancer and aspiring actress. She is in her prime. She was murdered by her own colleague in this very room. She was stabbed through the heart with a high heel by someone envious of her success. It was said that her spirit haunted the room, seeking revenge or even a way to live again. Despite the lingering pain, Jane was intrigued. She was a bit scared, but couldn't ignore Margarita's ghost story. It would complete her video perfectly. She returned to the bathroom to prepare. When she stood in front of the mirror, something was different. Jane leaned closer, squinting into the darkness. That's when she actually saw something. A ghostly figure stood behind me, his face pale and painted, his eyes sunken and dark. She wore an old dress, her expression a distorted mixture of longing and anger. I feel like maybe it's Margarita, She quickly raised her phone to record a video. The pain returned, piercing her chest like a blade, but Jane persisted in capturing her reflection on the glass. After a while, Ken didn't see Jane anywhere. Worried, he went to check near the restroom. The door was wide open, and he saw Jane acting very strangely. He was shocked to see Jane standing in front of the mirror, talking to herself, and he asked if she was okay. She slowly turned to look at Ken from head to toe and said, "Who are you?" Her words sounded strange, foreign. Her eyes widened in confusion. He chuckled awkwardly, thinking I was pulling one of my usual dark jokes. Clearly, there was some truth being overlooked. Ken led that girl out of the theater, unaware that his real girlfriend was trapped in the mirror, freeing a vengeful spirit. Jane was bound to this place with no escape. She screamed, but her voice was swallowed by the darkness. Unheard, she felt the weight of centuries pressing down on her. She was trapped. Perhaps she had been possessed when Jane started filming Margarita. Margarita had stolen Jane's life and identity, and now she was out in the world, free to pursue the fame that had been taken from her long ago. In the days that followed, Jane's social media was filled with increasingly strange and terrifying posts. Her followers loved the change, but no one knew they weren't following Jane, they were following Margarita, who was dead and now replacing Jane. The neighbor's dark secret. Everything started again when I walked past my neighbor's house. My steps slowed as I glanced at his front door, catching sight of a hand pressed against the glass, moving frantically. The glass was old and foggy. I saw someone inside, exhaling and writing help on the dust-covered window. For a second, I turned away, rushing back home. I didn't want to know what was happening behind that door. Back in bed, I couldn't sleep. The image of that pleading face, the desperate scrawl on the window, kept replaying in my mind. The sounds, the black bag, the screams. If I reported this to the police, I knew he'd find a way to cover it up, like he always did. Without evidence, everything would be pointless. I needed a clear and specific plan. I decided to reach out to my friend. I met my friend at the local cafe and explained everything, detailing the strange events and horrific scenes. He looked at me, skeptical, but didn't dismiss it right away. We had known each other for so long, neither of us wanted to believe this was happening. Then he suggested gathering photo and video evidence using advanced technology to avoid detection. I had to do whatever it took to prove my words. Neither of us could imagine what we were about to do next. But I promised him that we would only collect evidence and leave quickly and discreetly. The next morning, I put on a plumber's uniform and a fake mustache, mentally preparing for my decision. I approached my neighbor's door, disguised as a plumber. He opened it, eyeing me strangely, scrutinizing. He glanced at my house, then back at me, asking, "Nick, is that you?" I froze for a moment. I began faking my voice, using a different tone to deceive him, explaining I was sent to check and fix the city's main water pipes. At first, he seemed suspicious and told me to wait a moment before closing the door. I stood outside, not knowing what he was doing inside, waiting and adjusting my glasses. But eventually, he acted friendly and allowed me inside. As I entered, the house was much tidier than I had expected, and nothing suggested he was a murderer. As I pretended to inspect the pipes under his kitchen sink, he stayed close, following me throughout the house. My every move was under his watch. I hadn't anticipated this. His presence was a constant reminder that one wrong move could be my last. I racked my brain for a way to separate myself from him. Then, an idea struck. I asked him to let me check the pipes in the basement, explaining that I needed to inspect the pipes there, adding, "If you come with me, you'll need to be careful." A broken pipe could be very dangerous and make things worse. He hesitated. But finally, he allowed me to go down to the basement alone. I watched his shadow disappear into the darkness. I turned my attention to the house, moving quietly, looking through every corner, hoping to find something out of place. And then I saw it, an edge jutting out along a wall, as if something was being hidden. My fingers brushed along the edge, feeling the rough texture beneath my hand. With a gentle push, the panel creaked open, releasing a foul stench that made me nauseous. I hesitated. Well, would I pro? The smell was nearly unbearable, but curiosity overpowered my fear. I cautiously stepped closer, peering inside. There, in the dim light, I saw a long streak on the floor leading to black bundles that were oozing blood. Then I saw dozens of bodies, skeletal remains intertwined with decomposing corpses. Just as I was about to turn and escape, a cold hand gripped my shoulder. "Hello, my neighbor," a familiar voice whispered in my ear, full of malice. I felt the pressure of his grip tightening, but before I could react, he shoved me forward, standing in front of the door, blocking my only exit. His eyes showed satisfaction. I reached for my phone and pressed the emergency alarm button, just as my friend and I had planned beforehand. He quickly snatched the phone from my hand. Then there was a crackling sound as he crushed it underfoot. I realized I was truly trapped. The police stormed into the house unexpectedly. My friend, true to his word, had taken action when he received my emergency signal. He had told me beforehand that he would alert a trusted officer in case anything happened. The neighbor began to flee, but during the pursuit, he couldn't escape our plan. He was caught and couldn't deny the overwhelming evidence. When I handed over all the footage and he was taken into custody, I lay in the hospital thinking about what I'd been through. I had come closer to death than I ever imagined. I regretted nothing.